natural. And there was a possibility that it was back. The bedroom where the little tiny handprints were, about, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks before or after we found them, the teenage son that used to live in that room, so the family sold this house to Darrel, and they had raised their kids in it. They had 4 or 5 kids, I believe, and they moved like 45 minutes or an hour down the road, and they sold the house for, incredibly cheap for what they should have asked for it. And Darrel ended up getting this house. Well, the teenage son ends up putting a gun in his head, a bullet in his head, and commits suicide. And then we find these handprints, and so I'm wondering, like, okay, is this like, part of the suicide of this kid revisiting the house? What's going on? Maybe the ghosts are a bigger part of this than the Bigfoot thing. And so why don't we play clip 4? This is some of the EVPs that Darrel and I caught, and by now we're kind of figuring, okay, there are these sweet spots on the property. The shop is definitely a sweet spot, and the bedroom might be one. So this is a montage of the first EVPs we gathered.
Okay, now before I play 4, real quick question. The son shot himself. Did he shoot himself somewhere else or on the property?
Yeah, off the property. It's their new property, right, Darrel?
Yes, he actually they had moved down the road a ways, probably like Toby said, an hour. And it was a while after they had moved, probably 6 months or less, that he committed suicide after that. But he was actually raised in that house all his life, and that was his bedroom.
Interesting. So he probably, maybe his spirits came back. Okay, we'll play clip 4. Now, why don't we play that clip one more time? Now, to me, that sounds like a little child.
Well, there was a couple voices that we'd catch periodically that had a child sound to them for sure. One of those, I think, is actually a warning to me. We were staying up, long periods of time at night trying to see something, right? Some evidence, some visual evidence. And one of those voices there, in my opinion, sounds like it's saying, Toby, get back. And, I was insanely curious about what was going on. As a Bigfoot guy, is this a Bigfoot? And so we were sleeping next to the house at night in zero gravity chairs, or, coming up with new experiments to try to catch what was going on using baby monitors. You brought up at the beginning of your show that, or your co-host did, about baby monitors catching EVPs. Well, one of those sounds you heard was with a baby monitor. And Darrel got these baby monitors, and we started to use those to see if we could record not only video, but kind of communicate with what was happening. And the camera never caught anything. I think he could actually move the camera around with his phone remotely. And so there was this intelligence going on. But was it just ghost? Was it Bigfoot? The neighbors said that they saw UFOs, or they had strange gifts delivered to them. One of them was the old man up on the hill who had a missing elderly cat, and he's looking for his cat, and less than 2 or 3 days later, he goes to a sliding glass door, and there's his cat with a smashed head laying in front of his glass door. So, it sounded like something delivered his dead cat to him. It wasn't killed on the property. So, the area was super fascinating because of that. And then we started to see lights Darrel, I don't know if you'd ever seen a light to one of our night walks, but we saw this basketball milky white orb float down the hill off the creek bed into the middle of the road and then dissipate. And that was, on just an ordinary night, one of our night walks. Do you remember that, Darrel?
Yeah, I remember that, and I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And then, I recorded the things in the sky that showed up every now and then. It looked like a giant firework going off and on. Also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one time he went to film a giant light that was going parallel with us on one of our night walks. And as soon as he pointed his camera at it, this thing burst this giant bright white light, like an arc welder, and his phone blinked and turned off. I don't know if it powered off or what happened, but it was kind of a specific incident. Hard not to put those two together, but certainly strange for a regular Delta flight to do. So I don't know, but it was an amazing spot, and it would not give up. But the Bigfoot stuff was just everywhere. I mean, the roars, the whoops, the cries, the sounds, and then, the advantage of me living there on the property and being, having Darrel retired and being able to talk to him. Clip number 6 is a good example of something large and intelligent, eating on or near my camper, where are kind of surrounded by blackberries where my camper was. So in clip 6, you'll hear what sounds like something walking up to my recorder, chewing and smacking its lips, and it sounds like an animal chewing and ripping the thorns and vines and eating blackberries. And then I would come home that night to discover that blackberries had been strewn out to the tree line, like something had dropped them walking off into the forest from underneath my canopy once again. And as I'm checking my recorder, I see blackberry juice squirted underneath my vinyl awning about 7 feet up. So something had juiced or squirted or aspirated a giant purple stain underneath the awning. So clip number 6 will explain all that for you guys.
Okay, let's play it. Well, that was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the Bigfoot stuff was really on our mind. And, communication seemed to start to happen with them. I believe that, Sasquatch was visiting Darrel's property. We'd find hair. At one time we found Irish setter red hair attached to a greasy handprint, again going for the shop door. There was also a giant sausage, almost like Twinkies, Twinkie-sized fingers on the passenger side of his Dodge Ram, and it had pulled the bungee cord out the back of the truck and thrown the bungee cord out into the gravel driveway. And these were huge sausage-like fingers. I mean, either something was in the cab and pulled the bungee cord apart and broke it and threw it in the driveway, or it was standing on the passenger side, reaching over the driver's side and drug its fingers up. And those we dusted as well. And, when you put Darrel's hand up against those fingers there, it just looked silly. And again, they had this greasy, oily quality to them. And I was just utterly convinced, I still am, that he had Bigfoot on his property.
Well, I would think I'd be really concerned at this point. What is going on?
Yeah, well, Darrell, let's talk about the property damage. One of the things that happened is that things started to get messed with and destroyed. One of the gutters about, 10 feet up had been pinched and squeezed, and you could follow this muddy, kind of hairy striation thing coming down from the gutters on the green siding of this metal shop. And it looked like a pair of fingers had reached up and squeezed the gutter. And then we went to the backyard once, and there were these two wrought iron T-posts that had been bent at like a 20 or 30 degree angle about 3/4 of the way up. Now, nobody's going to bend wrought iron T-post, not easily. And, it was hard to explain how that could be done. But then when you find some of the, Darrell's vegetables had been taken and placed on the other side of the T-post, or, you play, let's play him clip 7, Darrell, the stomp, sense, knock, one where it's kind of stomping towards your audio recorder where the T-posts were bent.
Okay.
Yeah, I eventually got a parabolic here, and I set it up in the back of my property. The T-posts were on a chain link fence that went across the very back of the property, and I would set the parabolic recorder up every night, probably about 10 foot this side of the chain link fence, so you can play it. And something approached at the chain link fence, approached the recorder.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I think that's what that is.
Okay, let's give it a play. Okay.
Right. So there's an example of something very large, I believe, speaking at the same moment. It's kind of making this weird growly, grunty sound, and then hitting the fence, stepping over the fence. We don't know which part is happening, but we would hear strange voices back in that area too. One of the voices we heard was something coming up to Darrell's fence line at an odd hour at night and saying his little dog's name, Izzy, right? He had a little tiny dog, a really smart breed, and something walked up to the house in the backyard and said Izzy's name. It sounded like a little elf talking. I mean, it was kind of high-pitched, just like a munchkin, and it said Izzy's name. Then we would hear talking up in the trees all the time, just right out of earshot, enough to where you could hear it was language. And then the gifts got more complex. They got larger. They seemed significant. One time I had some cell phone issues, and we were commenting on that. The next day I found a muddy flip phone underneath the oar of my boat, like it had been fished out of the river. Another time I wanted to get a taxidermied rabbit, and we were toying with the idea of going on eBay and buying a taxidermied rabbit. And within a couple of days, out front of my trailer was a dead rabbit with a rock in its head. And it was so fresh when I found it, it didn't have a bug on it. And Darrell had just been out to that area. It's a gravel driveway, wide open. You would see a dead rabbit, especially if it had flies on it. This was like 85 degrees, and I just pulled in the driveway, and here's a rabbit with a rock sticking out of its head. And then 3 days later, at that point, we were kind of blown away by all this, and I talked to my girlfriend, and she goes, watch, next it'll be a snake. You hate snakes. And 3 days later, in the exact same spot, was a decapitated snake. And it was fresh, right? It had just been killed. It was writhing in pain when I drove in. The little tail on this guy was moving, and there wasn't a bug on it. So something serious was going on. And